Imagine a world in which you dread getting out of bed every morning, afraid to face school, and checking your Facebook only to see what malicious things your peers have come up with today. Imagine a world where the phrase "watch your back" is not just an expression. Studies by the American Justice Department show that 1 out of every 4 kids will be bullied this month. Bullying is often seen as something only portrayed in Hollywood movies, with the stereotyped jocks with their huge muscles and leather jackets picking on the short and skinny nerd with freckles, thick-rimmed glasses, and high-waist pants. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines bullying as treating abusively or affecting by means of force or coercion, and it can be verbal or physical. The question is, why does it happen? Some theories say that bullies themselves are the ones with the self-esteem problems, and they feel the need to take out their anger on others in order to feel better. This is similar to the conversation we had in class about criminals and how when they lose all connection to society and their peers, they reach a "fuck it" stage where they don't care about hurting themselves or others. Others argue that bullies actually have very high self-esteem, and their way of expressing their supposed superiority is through putting others down. Before delving into the specifics of bullying and its effects, let's examine the historical roots. In 1957, 9 courageous African American students made history by enrolling in the racially segregated Little Rock High School. As they approached the school, enraged white mobs tried anything they could to prevent the black students from entering the school, as depicted in this photograph of Elizabeth Eckford walking into her first day of school at Little Rock High. The Little Rock crisis occurred in a time full of racial tension and violence, but there is no doubt that the actions of the mobs count as bullying. Despite the legal reforms made by the federal government and state governments, people still found ways to show their hatred for blacks. Actions by violent community members and more defined groups such as the KKK demonstrated bullying techniques through lynching, beating, and verbal abuse. Civil rights movement incidents such as this and the Freedom Riders show that bullying can be based on not only personal problems, but also on stereotypes and generalizations. In class, we constantly address sub-patterns in society, such as race, class, gender, and age. Civil rights movement events are prime examples of how race can trigger bullying and violence, and can be detrimental to a cohesive society. The next historical event that I think is critical in our understanding of the effects of bullying is the Columbine High School shooting. April 20th, 1999 began as a normal day in Littleton, Colorado until about 11:15 a.m. 2 Columbine High School students, 17-year-old Eric Harris and 18-year-old Dylan Klebold, entered their school with 4 guns and many homemade explosives. They went on a shooting spree and took the lives of 12 students and 1 teacher. It is hard to fathom such an event, but it is important for us to examine the cause of their anger. The 2 boys had suffered bullying throughout their lives, and they saw this as their chance to show their suffrage and to get back at their bullies. Although it should not take such a significant and tragic event to prove the effects of bullying, Dylan and Eric's rampage was a lesson to be learned by everyone that bullying and even simple taunting can force a person over the edge. They not only mentally suffered, but they ended up taking futures away from 13 innocent people. The damage done by these 2 boys was preventable by their peers being more careful in how they treated people. Looking at these historical roots brings us to examine modern-day bullying. In the past few years, there has been a technology boom with the expansion and creation of many new tools of communication. Cyberbullying has become more common than face-to-face or physical altercations for many reasons. There are no direct consequences to cyberbullying, and it is easier to conceal your identity as a bully. It is also easy to hide from figures of authority. For example, at home, a parent may have no idea what their child is doing or saying on their computer behind their closed bedroom door. In my home state of Massachusetts, tragedy struck South Hadley High School. 15-year-old Phoebe Prince committed suicide after being tormented by a group of girls at her new high school following her move from Ireland. Part of a New York Daily News article covering the story said that, quote, students said Phoebe was called an Irish slut and a whore on Twitter, Craigslist, Facebook, and Formspring. And the nastiness didn't even end there. Her tormentors posted vicious comments on the dead girl's Facebook memorial page. This quotation in particular shows how bullying is not only physical violence and verbal torment, but it is now also haunting people through their phones and computers. Home used to be a safety net, an escape from torment at school, but now the comments can't be avoided with all of these new technologies. Weapons have shifted from guns and harmful objects to computers and cell phones. It is important for people to realize that although we have access to these social networking sites, and it is a great way to keep in touch, people easily take advantage of the communication and use it against others. As we look at these stories and try to understand and explain them, it is necessary to look at the reasons behind a bully's actions. According to teenshealth.org, bullies pick on the people they think don't fit in, maybe because of how they look, how they act, for example, kids who are shy and withdrawn, their age, race, religion, or because the bullies think their target may be gay or lesbian. This bar graph addresses the age problem, and it is clear that middle school years are the worst for enduring bullying, and the rates are only growing higher with time. Again, these are the subpatterns in society we have talked a lot about in class. What we have also addressed is the drive for superiority. In class, we have also discussed Karl Marx and W.E.B. Du Bois's conflict theory. This states that the most basic form of human interaction is competition. Also, there is an article in our Understanding Society reader called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life by Irving Goffman. His theory, impression management, says that we sometimes use tactics to change the way we are perceived by others through altering our looks, material belongings, and manners, as demonstrated here with wearing masks. This could be a possible explanation for a bully's actions. It is possible that the person is trying to hide their own flaws or insecurities by wearing a mask and acting stronger than they actually are by picking on those who are weaker. There is also the argument of nature versus nurture that we have said applies to countless subjects. It is possible that some bullies are genetically just more aggressive, or they have a gene that makes them violent or volatile. On the other hand, some may argue that bullies are the way they are due to past experiences, such as childhood abuse. Chapter 4 of our Sociology textbook talks about socialization and how we learn proper behaviors through observing our parents, friends, and siblings, as well as being taught what is right and wrong. Through the process of socialization, it is possible that bullies have learned that cruel actions and words are acceptable. Besides trying to understand a bully's perspective, it is also important to examine the long-term effects on the victim. Some think that physical altercations are the only ones that stay with a victim, but, as stated in an article by Mark Dombeck, it is not necessary to be physically harmed in order to suffer lasting harm. The picture I took here demonstrates that people are equally sensitive to words as they are to violence. It has been proven that childhood and young adult bullying leads to depression and anxiety later in life. This is because of lowered self-esteem and self-worth from the constant putting down by bullies. In a Science Daily article, a graduate of Columbine High School said that the memories of these experiences continue to be associated with depression and social anxiety. Although we will always struggle to completely identify with the motives and emotions behind a bully's actions, there are clear patterns in society that can help us map out when and why these events are happening and determine the effects.